conversation you'll have. Just so normal. I mean, I'm talking about it like it's a completely normal conversation. It's not a conversation I'll ever have outside of talking with people who want to know it. It's not like a conversation I could have with you. You know, you couldn't tell me what it was like to abduct and do all of these things. So it's a different type of conversation. Plus, being been in prison for, you know, almost 40 years, it's a different type of talking. It's if you ever meet an inmate and talk with them, you can often just feel it in their voice. It's different. They don't talk about anything. Inmates talk about the same thing every day. What'd you get for chow? Did you get a letter? What'd you do at work? Good night. Hey, what are we having for chow? Did you get a letter? That's it. Somebody got in a fight. That's it. There's nothing else. Nothing else happens in prison. Very stale, and it's, stupidity is like the law of the land. You have the prison staff, which they're just as bad as the inmates, and you have the inmates. And they're just as bad as the staff.
Can you talk a little bit about, you know, the differences in, like, actually speaking to Norris and Bittaker and the feeling you get from speaking to the two of them? Because they seem like night and day from everything I've understood, but maybe they're not. I mean, you would know better than I.
When you read stuff, you can't. You're reading somebody's interpretation. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've talked to both of them. They're just like talking to people. Larry has a little bit different. He has a sense of humor that's much different than Norris's. Norris tends to be a little bit, I would say Norris kind of behaves a little bit more normal. But then again, Norris was also raised by his natural parents. He had family. You know, he wasn't adopted and didn't have some of the problems that Larry grew up with. I think that kept Larry more recluse. I'm trying to think of the... I don't know how to describe them. It's like I can't describe them. He's like my cousin Bob, and you know, Bittaker kind of reminds me of my brother. No, it's nothing like that. They, as far as being like night and day, they're both very creative. Let me talk about their similarities. Bittaker's very good at mechanical things. He can make intricate pop-up cards. He could work mechanic stuff out on the street. Norris is a good painter. Like he does, really, I think he's a particularly good artist. He's very critical of himself, quite the perfectionist. Larry does have a higher IQ, but all that means is Larry can retain more knowledge than Norris. Doesn't mean Norris, an IQ doesn't mean you're smart or dumb. It just means what you can remember. That's all it really means. Bittaker can remember more than Norris can. It's funny. My IQ's 4 points higher than Bittaker's, and I remember when I told him that, you could see the expression on his face, not pleased. Well, kind of just, he was all proud of himself. 138. I think it's what he is. He's 138 or 140, and I said, yeah, but I'm 142. And he goes, really? And I go, yeah, I found out when I was a kid. And he's like, well, it doesn't mean. I said, I know what it means. It doesn't mean anything. You could just see he was a little bit, he likes, he could be a little competitive, somewhat. Norris, not so much. Norris did minimize a little bit more about what his involvement was in the case. And the only reason I think he did that is because he has, a dad, and he doesn't want he lives with, he has his blood family to think about. I don't think Norris wants to be remembered or to be thought of as being some vicious killer. I think he would rather, his parents think he was, misled, or, he was following the leadings of Bittaker. And I think he kind of led that on because I mean this in the nicest way, and Roy knows how I feel. I've taught Roy Siblin a little bit when it comes to the case, and like things that let's say I'd visit Larry 2 weekends, I would then go down to Corcoran, I'd visit Roy for 2 weekends, and then I'd back up to San Quentin, and San Quentin I would listen to their stories and begin catching where the inconsistencies were, and then I'd call them on it, and I'd get one of them to really say, look, this is exactly how it happened. And when I would confront the other with what the other one said, I could start finding where the pieces were missing, so to speak. And, this is something that doesn't happen overnight. Anybody who's listening and they're like, oh, I'm going to write Bittaker and Norris, and, I've been doing this for years. Again, I think the first letter I got from Norris was late 2004. My first letter to Bittaker was 2006, and it's been a lot of visits We're talking over 11 years. Tons of phone calls. I mean, I don't even know how many phone calls I've accepted. I mean, it's not in the thousands, but it's in the hundreds, I'm sure. Like hundreds, 5, 6, something like that. I've talked to them, all the time. It's it's not something you can start overnight. And anybody who thinks this is something you can make a bunch of money doing, after you've done it for 17 years, you might be able to, make a couple of bucks. But if you go into this with a thought you're going to make a ton of cash, you're not. It's a lot of work, and unless you can dedicate hours to writing letters, you're not going to be very good at it. It takes some dedication and a little bit of eye will and a little bit of money and lots of elbow grease.
Well, I'm curious. Okay, so at what point? I understand when Bittaker finally came around to writing with you, but at what point did they get to the point where they're happy to actually talk to you, or visit, for you to visit them, or were they always that way because they don't get too many visitors?
They get a lot of people who say they're going to visit but never do. I was Norris's first visit besides his father, and I mean I brought my partner with me at one point, my wife, and he was so nervous. Because my first visit, I came without her, and he was like, "I'm so glad you didn't bring your wife." And I was like, "Why? He was very uncomfortable. He wouldn't hug my wife. When she went to meet him, he put out his hand. And he had told me, I don't know if I deserve the compassion of any woman. He goes, look what I've done. And I was like, Roy, you're not the same person. It's been 30-some-odd years. You don't have to, you're being punished. You're paying your debt back to society. You can have friends. It's not the end of the world. And it took, and Bittaker, on the other hand, was always very jubilant, Oh, and start pinching your, the fat on the side of your waist. And he was just, real touchy-feely. Not in like a groping way, more like a Uncle Bad touch way. Like, he's giving you little pinches, and it could be provocative, but it's really just all in fun. Like, he never made any of us uncomfortable. Like, he's not a groper per se or anything. And Norris would never. I mean, and I could bring a girl to see him with the biggest tits and be like, "Hey, you want to give him a squeeze?" Oh, no, I couldn't do that. He's not that. Very, not quite. They're a little bit different, and we all are. But what makes them different is they go to those people. Unlike some of us like blonde, some of us are shy. Yeah, those guys are different because they wanted something. If they wanted something bad enough, they just take it.
So, I mean, these types of guys, and again, I hate to pigeonhole them, but let's be honest. I mean, a lot of people talk about how they're manipulators, they're this and they're that. When you go to visit these guys, have you ever gotten that vibe, especially from Bittaker? And I bring that up only because he seems like the manipulator of the two.
No, Bittaker would insist never send me money. I don't need money. I don't want for anything. They feed me. I get my indigent envelopes. I don't need anything. To try to get those guys to buy them, let's say after I've been writing them for a while, hey, can I get you guys, can I get you a TV? What can I get you for all the, artwork? You sent me so much stuff. How can I repay you a gesture of friendship? It's like pulling teeth with both of them. They weren't that, they're not that into material things. And for being in prison, that was always something that surprised me. Bittaker hated to ask, but I found if you just forced it, if you just said, "Hey, I'm gonna buy you this, accept it," he reluctantly would accept. Norris, on the other hand, still has family that helps him, and he says, "Look, something happens to my family, yes, but until then, no." And I'm saying this with people listen to this and think, he's full of shit. No, those two guys never struck me as being manipulative. Never. Now, I'm not saying that inmates aren't. Believe me, I've met some real peaches in my time. Oh, goodness, I could tell you some of the worst people. And they're usually people that rape children, oddly enough. I have found I've had the worst luck with inmates who are child rapists and killers. They tend to be the shittiest people on the planet. Who would have thought? But yeah, when it comes to, and not that Bittaker and Norris, not to minimize, hey, killing 12-year-old girls is a no-no. Killing anybody is a no-no. You know, unless you've got a pretty good reason or you're prepared to, you know, somebody's wronged you, even in a way that is not realistically wrong, but you perceive it to be wrong, at least to have them have done something. These people did nothing to them, nothing to offend them. They were just opportunity.
Hey, elaborate on that real quick, because I like to put our critics to rest, the people that say, you know, that we're fucked up because we're interested in this type of thing. Look, we're not condoning what they do. We're just fascinated by it. I'm sure you could talk about that better than I could even.
Let me tell you something. MSNBC's got a whole show that takes up hours of their airtime and it's not that MSNBC's lockup isn't showing the toys for tots. They're showing inmates killing each other. You've got A&D doing, you know, doco after doco. You have court TV. You have you know, hateful people like Nancy Grace. Just, you know, they make all their money off murder, off crimes, off prisons. But you get somebody like me comes along. I make $20 selling a piece of a lock of Bittaker's hair, let's say, or you do a podcast where you drink with a couple of your friends. We're committing some crazy sin. Oh, it's so awful. You know, I mean, I know we can swear, and I try not to, but you can go fuck yourselves. All of you that got that fucking attitude, fuck you. You know, you've got fucking victims advocates making more money than I would ever make. They tell people about my website, not me. You've got guys out there who will actually find people selling murder memorabilia and will contact the victims, tell them the inmates are getting a huge cut of this, which is not true, get them all riled up, and then, you know, there's on the news, the inmates are making this money. But that's not the case. The inmates largely don't even know their items are being sold. Then you've got these, you know, these authors. They're not writing about the inmates. They're writing about the murders of these innocent people. That's why people buy the books. I'm making a profit. Let's say you guys aren't even making a profit. You guys are having a discussion. Jesus, let's get rid of free speech. Let's get rid of capitalism when it applies to things we don't like. You know, I always think of Larry Flint. You had so many racists in the government. He made some interracial porn, and what did they do? Booked him on obscenity charges and sentenced him to life in prison. That's not make-believe. That wasn't just in that silly movie. They went after him because of that racial rhetoric in the United States government about interracial porn. And when people want to attack folks like me, I'm like, you know, I'm just trying to make a couple of money off of, you know, inmate memorabilia. I'm not profiting off the victims. I'm not rehashing horrific stories. I'm not doing any of that. So I know people want to get all hot and bothered. Go yell at the authors. Go yell at the networks. You know, they're making way more money than I do. You know, I know victims advocates that put my profit. I know a victim advocate who made 10 times what I made this year. Last year. 10 times what I made. So, you know, you want to know where the money's at? It's on the other side of the coin, but it's the same thing. You know, I make a little bit of money, you know, selling a letter, a lock of hair, and the inmates aren't getting paid. You have a little talk radio podcast, and we're committing some heinous thing, disrespecting, glorifying. I'm not glorifying crime. You know, goodness, I've never, you know, I might make a joking comment saying, "Go Team Murder." But, you know, I mean, like, my diet's vegetarian because I don't eat meat. I don't believe in harming, you know, animals. And then people want to rub me for that. They're like, well, you seem to care so much about animals. And I always respond, I never said I was a people person. But the point is people have a double standard when it comes to true crime. You know, you can make a mini-series, you know, about, you know, Norman Bates, you know, a character that is so loosely based on Ed Gein, but based on Ed Gein nonetheless. You can have these, you know, and make all this money off, you know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs. You can make all the documentaries. You can make Helter Skelter movies. You can do interviews and make all this money, but goodness, you try to sell a letter? Don't do that, man. You know, they'll try to have you arrested. People will send you death threats talking about skinning your kids. I had a guy tell me once he was going to skin my kids alive and drag them behind a truck. All because somebody put a piece of the road from Jasper up where James Byrd was dragged. Some person told me they were going to do that to my kids. The kids I don't